Like it or not, our world runs on data. More data is created, analysed, processed and communicated now than at any other point in human history. And communicating data is difficult. It's probably why so many people do it badly, whether accidentally or on purpose. When this happens, it has consequences. It can lead people to form opinions or make decisions that don't actually have a basis in reality. But there is hope. Communicating data specifically through a visual medium is a skill that can be learned, and that's what I'm going to teach you today. But before we go any further, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell icon so you don't miss future videos. My name is Rintoul, and in my day-to-day work on my PhD in astrophysics, I see a lot of different visualizations of data, particularly from other scientists. The quality is mixed. I'm also rather chronically online and a nerd for politics and studies on society, and there's a right mix of quality in the graphs and plots outside science as well. One of the most famous worst offenders for this in the media is Fox News. During Barack Obama's second term as President of the United States, Fox News shared this graph of the US unemployment rate in 2011. Let's look at that last data point. They've labelled it as 8.6%, but have plotted it at the same level as the 9% in October. Wonderfully misleading. If they had plotted this correctly, it would look more like this. Or how about this bar graph, also from Fox News, showing Obamacare enrolment? Yes, 7,066,000 is more than 6 million, but it isn't almost 3 times as high as this graph suggests. In this graph, Fox News haven't labelled their y-axis, so what would appear to be the 0 point will in fact actually represent around 5.4 million people. Rescaling this graph to have the base be 0, this graph looks more like this. And don't worry, conservatives, CNN is just as guilty of bad statistics reporting. In 2014, they reported on Scottish independence polling, stating that 58% of people supported independence, while 52% wanted to remain within the United Kingdom. No, you're not failing at basic maths here, CNN is. Those two numbers add up to 110, not 100%. That's real life. What about in science? Well, I said things were mixed, and that is very true. These graphs from a paper on galaxies use colour schemes that don't work well if you view them in black and white, with the second one, known as jet, being completely unusable. And this graph, well, it's literally known as the confusogram. I don't even know what's going on here. All of these examples fail at being good graphs in some way. The examples from the news media mislead the viewer into thinking something that the data just doesn't support. The examples from these astronomy papers don't actively mislead, but they do confuse or exclude the viewer. They fail at the very communication they're attempting to achieve. So how do we fix this? How do we make figures that are better? Like I said at the outset of this video, making good, informative visualizations of data, whatever that data is a skill that can be learned. As we go through how to make a good figure, a good data visualization, keep this in mind. A good figure is 3 things. It is simple, it is uncluttered, and it is accessible. Since making a figure is all about communication, the first step in making a good data visualization is to ask yourself, what message am I trying to convey? Are you trying to compare multiple sets of data? For example, comparing how some property, like temperature, varies over time when you have the windows open versus when you have the windows closed. Are you trying to rank something like the busiest train stations in the UK? Or are you trying to explore different compositions, such as the proportions of different age groups that would vote for specific political parties in an election? The type of information you're trying to convey dictates what sort of graph you will make, because there are so many types of graphs. Bar graphs, line graphs, pie charts, don't use pie charts, heat maps, box plots, histograms, and more. If you're not sure what to use, a good starting point is to look at what similar works use. If you're in academia, look at what other papers in your field do for similar data. See what's common and ask yourself, is it clear? Does it work? And if so, why does it work? Would that work for your data? Once you've got an idea of what sort of data visualization you're going to make, it's time to make a first draft. If you're relatively new to making data visualizations, you might need to go learn some new software to make your plots. Simple plots like line graphs and bar charts can be made in simple programs like Excel or Google Sheets. Anything more complicated than this is probably going to need something a bit more specialised, like the matplotlib package in Python or some other programming-based visualization tool. If you've never tried this before, there are loads of good tutorials online. Just remember, improving how you communicate your data is no different to improving any other aspect of your work. It takes work and it takes time. Just be willing to spend the time learning it. In making the first draft of your graph, keep in mind those first two things a figure must be. It must be simple and it must be uncluttered. You might have thousands of data points that you want to plot along with a line for the average, but is that simple? You might have data that would let you plot 10 different lines all showing slightly different things, but is that uncluttered? The graph that is trying to say 10 things will say none of them well. Rather than plotting every point, plot lines with shading for the uncertainty. Rather than plotting every possible line, plot the most important ones. Highlight the key information. Keep it simple and keep it uncluttered. A good rule of thumb is that you should ideally have only 2 to 4 lines on a graph, and definitely no more than 6 without a very good reason. Once you've got your basic graph, it's time to think about colour and styling. This is where accessibility comes in. Colour is a really powerful tool. It's been shown to make figures more memorable, but you have to keep in mind 3 simple rules. Colour must always mean something. The colours you use must still be distinguishable in grayscale, and the colours you use must be accessible to people who suffer from colour blindness. First off, colour has meaning, and it can be really useful for accentuating the point that you're trying to make with your visualization. However, if used improperly, it can lead to misinterpretation. For example, let's consider this screenshot I've taken from the 270 to Win website showing the likely results of the 2024 US presidential election at time of writing. Pretty good visualization on the whole. It uses recognisable colours for Democrat, Republican and toss-up states. It's very clear. But what if I swapped the red and the blue? I mean, first off, this looks all sorts of wrong. Like blue Texas, red California, yikes. But it's the same data. I've not changed the data. All I've done is change which party is shown as blue and which is shown as red. But if you printed this in a newspaper, the first reaction to this is that it's misleading because the US has accepted colours for the 2 major parties. Now, this is a rather extreme example, but the same applies to other common colour quantity associations. Temperature, for example. It would be odd to colour hot temperatures in as blue and then cold colours in as red. It goes against what we expect, what we're used to. The next consideration you have to make when you're choosing colours or a colour scheme is how accessible they are. Yes, it's true that most people viewing scientific papers or news articles will see them online, on a phone or a computer. They'll see them in colour. But it's always possible that your figure will be printed or viewed in some way as a grayscale image, in black and white. Therefore, it is important that the colours you use will translate well into grayscale, into black and white. This sounds really simple, but it isn't always. Take this graph, for example. Viewed in colour, the blue and the red are very easy to distinguish. However, if I decrease the saturation to show it in grayscale, things are far less clear. We can see where the extremes are, but it's now impossible to tell the difference between the extreme highs and the extreme lows. This is a problem faced by almost all diverging colour maps like this, where there's a neutral colour in the centre and dark but different colours on the extremes. As such, it's probably best to only use colour schemes like this when you can control the format that it will be viewed in, such as a PowerPoint, a YouTube video, or something that you know will only ever be printed in colour. If you want to be sure that you're grayscale safe, look out for perceptually uniform colour maps. These are colour maps that vary in colour value and brightness uniformly throughout their range. so you can be sure they'll work well in grayscale, as opposed to maps like Jet that do this when you desaturate them. It's completely useless. But being grayscale safe is sadly only half the battle. Around 5% of the population experiences some form of colour blindness. The rate is higher amongst men. As such, with around 1 in 20 people experiencing some form of colour perception difficulty, it's important that your visualisations are colourblind safe. This sounds like a lot, I know. Fortunately, there are many tools that make this easier for you. If you want to just compare individual colours or a colour palette, Adobe Colour is a great free website that includes accessibility tools for checking contrast and colourblind compatibility. Many plotting softwares, including common Python packages like Matplotlib, have colour maps built in that are colourblind safe and perceptually uniform. Some common ones are Viridis, Inferno, Magma, and Plasma, though there are many others. Now that you have your draft figure in suitable colours for both the context and the accessibility, it's time to ask yourself a few questions. Is this figure saying what I mean it to say? Is this figure trying to say too much? Is this figure simple, uncluttered, and accessible? If the answer to any of these questions is no or not enough, then iterate in this process. Add more descriptive labels and legends, tweak the colours, try creating a figure with subplots to reduce the clutter in a given panel. Keep iterating until you're happy with it. Then show it to somebody else. One of the biggest difficulties that everybody has with communicating something they know a lot about is knowing what level to pitch something at and how to make it clear. You know what this figure is meant to say, so show it to someone who doesn't. Take their feedback and keep iterating until it's the best that it can be. Then you should have a good figure, a good data visualization. See, it's not that complicated. It just takes time. I really hope this video has been informative and will help you in making better figures in the future. Learning to make good figures is difficult, but fortunately there are people who can help. Come join our community Discord server at the link in the description. You'll find like-minded people there who are really supportive and more than happy to comment and offer advice on any figures that you might want help with. If you are looking for something else to watch, then there is some recommended viewing on screen now, and all that leaves for me to say is thank you very much for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next one.